Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, a topic that our community has repeatedly requested that we cover, Egypt. We look at the ongoing violence in the country and what lies ahead for Egyptians. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, when we look at Egypt, no political consensus on the ground.
Definitely not.
Our online community,
no political consensus there either. And what people online are telling us is they increasingly feel like they're being forced to be in one of two camps. Right. Now, our producer Dan Ming tweeted us this: Egypt is complicated. It's a political map by Griffin Paul Jackson. I'm scrolling down here, and this explains what I just mentioned. People say that they're forced to be in the pro-Morsi camp or the pro-army camp, but as you can see, the reality, as this graphic shows, is that there's so many more parties than that, and Egyptians are so much more than that. So of course we want to hear from all of those sides in today's discussion, so join the conversation using the hashtag AJStream.
I love that graphic, it's so complicated.
Very complicated.
Hopefully our guests will be able to unpack it a little bit more for us. Joining us in the studio as part of this conversation is Tarek Radwan, and Tarek is the Associate Director for Research at the Atlantic Council. That's a Washington think tank. It's good to have you in the stream, Tarek.
Thank you so much.
You'll hear much more from Tarek in just a moment, so sit tight. Now, this is a story that you're going to want to be part of between Twitter and Facebook and Google+. We make it really easy for you to be in the stream, and we love hearing from you. So send us your stories that you're following, and you can do that on Facebook. That's where I am right now. Just post your ideas there, and they could end up on the show. Now, here are some of the avatars of people tweeting into the stream right now. Violence continues to sweep across Egypt as anti-coup demonstrators face off against security forces. The crackdown has left hundreds dead and thousands more injured since August the 14th, with scenes like this now the norm. Divisions are growing stronger as the government calls for counter-protests to confront what they're calling terrorism, while Muslim Brotherhood leaders continue to stage fresh rallies. As pro-Morsi protesters demand the ousted president be reinstated, state officials are proposing that the Brotherhood be dissolved. Egyptians are bracing themselves for even more clashes. So, given the escalating tensions and rapidly deteriorating situation, what's next for Egypt, and what does it feel like to be an Egyptian amidst all of the chaos? Joining us from London is Mona Al-Kazaz. She's a spokeswoman for the Muslim Brotherhood in the UK. On Google Plus Hangout from Cairo is Miral Brinji, a Tamarud supporter, and that's the movement that originally called for President Mohamed Morsi's removal. She's also a member of the Dastur Party. And on Skype is actor and activist Khalid Abdallah. He's also a co-founder of Mozareen Collective. That's a group dedicated to citizen media in Egypt. It's great to have all of you in the stream. I want to start with Miral. Miral, back on June the 30th, that is when mass protests happened across Egypt. The idea behind that movement was to remove President Morsi. Looking back on that event, do you have any regrets at all?
Well, of course not. First of all, I'm not really impressed with the way foreign media keeps referring to what happened on June 30th, a coup. So if it was a coup, I wouldn't be supporting it now.
So Miral, did I actually mention the word coup at all in the introduction?
Sorry?
So I don't believe I actually mentioned the word coup in the introduction. So I'm really interested in what you feel after those protests, that mass protests.
Well, of course, I don't regret it, actually. We knew that this was going to happen the day Morsi became president. A lot of people believed that if the political Islam reached power through democracy, it would never leave it. And this is what's happening now. So no regrets at all. Of course, nobody is happy to see innocent people die. But at the same time, it's quite a complex situation because a lot of the pro-Morsi protesters, even if they are unarmed and innocent, they know that many of the pro-Morsi supporters are armed and they're not peaceful protesters. They are criminals.
Right, let me just bring in Mona. Let me just bring in Mona here. Mona, if you could backtrack to 2 months or so, go back to how the Muslim Brotherhood dealt with the protests and now what you're actually dealing with right now, what would you do differently?
So just a couple of points. First of all, it's quite sad, if not pathetic, to see an intelligent young woman going through intellectual hoops to justify the slaughter of her own countrymen. I find it really puzzling, to be honest. Another thing, I actually would like to start by putting things by laying out the framework of what happened. We Egyptian people, myself, my family, my friends, we all went against the dictatorship in 2011. We wanted a free Egypt. Then we overthrew Mubarak. We had 2 years of transition, which led into a democratic process in place. And then all of a sudden, a military coup was orchestrated. It destroyed all the democratic processes we had in place. It came in with blood on its hand. It came in destroying every single democratic process we've had in place. It came in with massacre after another, with the worst massacre in the modern history of Egypt, as described by Human Rights Watch last Wednesday. We're seeing further violations of human rights. We're seeing a return of a repressive regime. We're actually seeing a return of Mubarak himself, whom we as Egyptians overthrew 2 years ago. We're seeing Egypt going down a very dark tunnel with justification for the killing of the political opponents. So instead of actually playing the game politically, they actually the opposition leaders failed to come in through the ballot box, and they came on the back of the tanks. So for 2 consistent years, we had consistent winners in the democratic process and consistent losers.
Right.
The winners now are either imprisoned or tortured or detained, and the losers now are leaders who came on the back of the tanks. I personally think, as Egyptians, we all need to work together for a democratic process. But we're seeing now mass murder of the opposition. So the military junta who orchestrated this military coup against the democratic process and crushed Egypt's dream of democracy, they actually now have blood on their hands and they're killing anyone who opposes them. This is not a way to democracy. This is a way to a dark future for Egypt.
Mona, you mentioned several things in there that our online community is picking up on. Tariq, she mentioned Mubarak, she mentioned democracy. Nasihan on Twitter says, after 30 years of Mubarak dictatorship in Egypt, democracy seems even harder to achieve for Egyptians compared to a year ago. And Ahmed, our former stream member, tweets in, democracy, like those slaughtered in Egypt since Wednesday, looks dead. Egypt is regressing. So how far have we come from 2 years ago?
Well, sadly, I think we've come full circle. The fact of the matter is that we have right now a strong military leader in the form of General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We have a Muslim Brotherhood movement that seems to be under severe pressure, highly repressed. And we have also a liberal bloc that is submissive to the actions of the military and the interim government, and a resurging police that is trying to reassert itself in the streets and returning, I think, back to a very strong police state.
Khalid, let me bring you into the conversation.
I'd like to respond to the accusation that
go ahead, and then I'm going to bring Khalid in. Go ahead.
By the army and the police forces slaughter my fellow countrymen. I would just like to pose one question to Ms. Mona here, and I would like to understand what is her definition of a protester carrying a machine gun.
There's a slight delay, so there's going to be a little delay before Mona
the protesters
replies.
have been peaceful. If I may, yeah. So the protests have been largely peaceful, have been actually absolutely peaceful under the scrutiny of international media.
I would highly contest
the sit-ins
that.
have been
I would
peaceful.
highly
The
contest
only
that.
violence, please allow me to continue. Please allow me to continue, please. So even if you read today's Human Rights Watch report, for example, they said the protesters have been peaceful. We're talking about peaceful sit-ins. The international media saw how peaceful Rawah has been for the past 48 days. The violence we've seen was unilateral and excessive on the side of the military junta who are taking lead of Egypt. The only language they're speaking is the language of bullets and tanks. they failed. For example, when the international mediators came in to try to sort out a better future for Egypt, a resolution of the standstill, the General Sisi was intoxicated by the power he had, whereas our side, the pro-democracy side, agreed to the brokers to the negotiation.
Mona?
The point I want to make is we are very open as pro-democracy movement, and we want peaceful Egypt. We are peaceful. We have been peaceful, and we will always be peaceful and defiant against this military rule and against this military junta who usurped Egypt's institution.
Mona, I'm going to bring Khaled into the conversation. Khaled, please jump in the conversation. What are we not seeing in this debate so far?
I'm afraid there are many things that are not being said, and I'm going to do my best not to sort of not to be involved in mudslinging, because in the current situation that we're in, we need to be very careful with our words, and we need to define what we say very, very carefully. When we call there are some very complicated words that are being used here: democracy, peaceful protest, things like that. In response to, for example, the idea that the Muslim Brotherhood sit-ins were peaceful, I have a very simple response, which is the fact that I have a personal acquaintance of mine whose brother was tortured to death in one of their sit-ins. The idea that the entire Brotherhood apparatus is a peaceful one is, of course, entirely ridiculous. On the other hand, it is also ridiculous.
Can you explain why you say that?
It's ridiculous to say that everyone who has been involved in these sit-ins has not been peaceful. Of course, there have been a huge number of people who have been peaceful and who are out there as a matter of conscience. Now, we may disagree with the ideology behind their conscience, but that's another matter. We may call the ideology which they hold fascist, but that's also another matter. Now, on the level of the idea that this is a pro-democracy movement, I'm afraid that has also been borne out in Morsi's rule to be proved also to not be true. The ballot box is not the only sign of a democracy. How you use a democracy is also part of that process.
Right.
And what Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood in power did is they used the tools of democracy to disenfranchise the majority of the population, who came out very clearly on the 30th of June to say, you cannot use the tools of democracy, you cannot use referendums, you cannot use the ballot box, you cannot create a constitution in your own image.
Khaled, so let me just bring us up.
This is democracy.
Let me just bring us up to date here, Khaled, because where are we on to that?
If I may ask, actually.
Finally, the other issue.
Guest, just hold on one second. Khaled, bring us up to date, though.
I have to say that the words anti-coup are used frequently on Al Jazeera, and I'm afraid I think as a nomenclature it is very, very imprecise, because it suggests that everyone who is not anti-coup is pro-coup. And that is absolutely not true. It also decides to define what's happening as a coup, which is something that we can kind of discuss later. Because
I don't want to discuss terminology that's used on other programs. I would really like to get on with this debate. So I don't want to talk about media coverage. I don't want to talk about coup or anti-coup. I didn't start with that phrase. We're wasting time. Mona, go ahead. What's happening in Egypt today? Explain it.
So what happened is that there's a failed opposition that failed to win through failed to impose its roadmap through two different referenda, and then are now imposing their roadmap through the power of the bullets and tanks. And now the leader Al-Baradei has failed, and now he fled to Vienna because he drove Egypt down a very dark tunnel, a tunnel of extreme polarization. What we're seeing now is we have the protests that are pro-democracy. They have been peaceful in every single word. I can actually quote some of the international journalists like Patrick Kingsley. He said he hasn't seen a single protester with a weapon. I can mention Robert Fisk. I can mention every single international media outlet saying they have not seen the protesters armed. It's actually the propaganda machine of the Egyptian media this current junta.
Okay, Mona, I would like you to just take a pause for a moment, because I really want to get the community into this conversation. So just take a pause. Mona will continue to talk just for a little bit longer than you would expect, just because there's a slight delay between Washington and London. So she does hear me, which is why it takes a little bit of time for her to stop. Malika.
Tariq, I want to bring you back in here with this video comment. Have a listen to this.
I'm against Morsi because of the lack of achievements and how they went about abusing power, which is reminiscent, if not worse, than the Mubarak era. But I'm also against military rule because they're in it for themselves and not the people. No one wants curfew to worry about their brother or sister or mother or father getting killed while they go down on the streets. But I think things have definitely gotten out of hand, and there's so much hate right now that people have forgotten about why the revolution really started. Egyptians have lived together for thousands of years, so there's no reason why they can't do it now.
Sultana, we brought this up at the very top of the show. Whether you're brotherhood, whether you're military, are those the only two choices that Egyptians have?
No, and I think that Khaled is right in the sense that we're looking at false binaries here. There are so many people, the divisions are so deep that they're trying to force people into these predefined roles. But the fact of the matter is that there is no pro-Morsi or pro-military coup circle. There's a lot of overlap. There are plenty who are against both. There are plenty who don't even care about politics and would wish this would all go away. I think that Egyptian society is far more complex than these binaries that are trying to be shoved down everyone's throat.
Morale, let me just bring you back into the conversation. If we're looking
if I may respond, please.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Morale first of all, Mona, because you've been responding an awful lot. Morale, if we're looking at a path to democracy for Egypt, where are we right now on this path?
I think we are closer now than we were in after the 18 days that brought down Mubarak. I think now we are only just going back to the road that we were supposed to take back then, which is handing the country over to the appointing the president of the Supreme Court as a president, as the constitutional custom in Egypt was supposed to be. I think now the president is a civilian. The country has a civilian president, and this is a very important point. And another important point that I think is always overlooked by the foreign analysts and people who are not located inside Egypt and can't really, live this situation, which is the threat to national security. I mean, Ms. Mona still hasn't answered my question. What does she think of a protester holding a machine gun? But at the end of the day, this is a huge national security issue, not just inside Egypt, in the entire region. The U.S. Sent out a global alert, and it closed many embassies across the region for an entire week. And this says a lot about the sort of terrorism that is being fought in Egypt now, which has close ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, which the Muslim Brotherhood leaders continue to incite. And even, Dr. Mohammed al-Biltagi, in his very famous statement, says, once Morsi is back in power, the attacks in Sinai will completely
Which was taken
stop.
out of context. Which was obviously taken out of context. If I may interject, please.
Go ahead.
So just a few points, I'd like to state the facts. A few points were mentioned which actually really need responding. The first point is, well, if there's no path, if the democracy is not through the ballot box, is it through the power of the weapons and tanks? And this is
I didn't ask you about democracy. I asked you what do you call a protester holding a machine gun.
Please allow me
and
to
you
continue,
didn't answer me.
So please allow me to continue. So the second point I would like to make actually
I
is
hope you answer at the end.
These protests are peaceful and have been peaceful, and the only violence we're seeing is actually on the side of the military junta. Your other guest is cheerleading for. So if you're cheerleading for the slaughter of your own countrymen, I think this is actually a huge problem. The no respect for the sanctity of human lives. This is actually quite disturbing. I just like to continue, please. That in every single step we're going through a democratic process. We want a democratic transition. But hijacking and usurping power using the power of tanks and bullets, you actually know a tree by its fruit, and you know a military coup by the crimes against humanity they're actually committing. I would like to continue. Please just allow me to continue. So the democracy, it's not about the Muslim Brotherhood anymore. If I just would,
who have actually had the opportunity to lead a democratic process, and they are the main organisation that has utterly failed to do so. They came to power through the ballot box.
I disagree with you. I just disagree with you. We
no
need to work together in order to get the democracy to work. But if you open up dialogue,
Okay, Khaled and Mona, I'm going to ask you to just pause for a moment. Khaled, I'm also going to ask you to pause for a moment.
Democracy is also about ensuring everything from the independence of the judiciary to the independence of the press to the independence of how laws are written. And the Muslim Brotherhood in power specifically aimed with Morsi's presidential decree that I don't know how you can call democratic, where he suddenly made himself the sole authority.
So now you agree with the presidential decree.
Mona, take a pause. Khaled, take a pause. I want to bring Tarek into the conversation. I know everybody wants to add a perspective. Tarek, I'd like to hear yours.
So many people see themselves as the fighters, those who represent the revolution, and unfortunately, there are so many on this side who are on both sides who are just so wrong. The Muslim Brotherhood was, in fact, a problem during Morsi's rule. They did squander the legitimacy and break the social contract, and in a system, in a constitutional system that did not allow for any sort of early elections unless there was somehow a People's Assembly, and of course we all know the difficulty when it was dissolved and reconstituting it. But just as the Muslim Brotherhood made so many mistakes during the time that Morsi was in power, the so-called secular liberals are making those same mistakes right now. Everything that we've seen under Morsi's rule, the exclusionary politics,
let's be precise.
I would highly contest that. I would highly contest that.
Okay, let me just ask Mona, Morale and Khaled just to pause for a moment because I want to get the community in before we run out of time on the main show. Malika.
Of course, they want to get in just as badly as our panelists do. So I'm just going to read a couple of thoughts here. On Facebook, Ali says, Egyptians are confused. They protest about everything. A country cannot move forward without a little patience. Now, I know our guests are going to want to jump on that, but there's another one from Ben Norwood on Google Plus who says, it's hard to say who's worse, the Muslim Brotherhood or the military. It's likely both regard lives as cheap and expendable for the greater glory of their cause. Khaled, I want to go to you on this last tweet from Ayub, who says, how can we trust the military not to overthrow the next elected president if millions take to the streets again? And basically what it sounds like he's saying is that if the basic structure of the Mubarak era regime is still in place, because that was not disrupted in the revolution, how do you get progress?
Well, a major part of any democracy is its checks and balance system. The fact of the matter is we don't have any anymore right now. And so the only guarantee, the only checks and balance system that we really truly have is people on the street.
Okay.
Now I am truly afraid of what the military leadership that we have at the moment. I believe that the process that they are leading is one that they are leading abysmally. I am afraid about the killing that is taking place. I'm afraid of the silence that is on Egypt's streets. But somehow in that silence, I actually see room for a kind of optimism. Because within that silence, what I see is exactly the confusion that your people on Twitter are talking about. People are not quite happy with what is going on.
Okay.
They don't feel comfortable being complicit in the bloodletting, but they are also confused.
All right, Khaled, this is a perfect place to end the main show on. You can't just add it unless you want to do the news on Al Jazeera, which is relevant because Egypt is the leading story, but we will come back to you for that comment and for all of our guests' comment as we move them over to the post-show. This conversation, does it have an end even? Probably not for a long time. But stream.aljazeera.com is where we will be taking it up in the post-show. Meanwhile, what we'll be doing on Tuesday? Do you believe in UFOs? Or maybe you think that 9/11 was an inside job. Conspiracy theories are all over the internet, and on Tuesday, we'll examine the culture that is driving this. I know you'll be intrigued by that conversation. Stay with us. The post-show is next at stream.aljazeera.com as we talk about what's next for Egypt. See you online. Thanks. Hello again, this is the Streams Post Show. We're continuing our discussion on Egypt's state of affairs and what it will take to end the bloodshed. Still with us, Tarek Radwan, he's a Middle East analyst. Mona Al-Kazaz is a spokeswoman for the Muslim Brotherhood. Miral Brinji is a member of the Dastur Party, and Khalid Abdallah is an actor and activist. I know it's tough for me to interrupt our guests, but sometimes you're at the end of the show and you've got to go. Khalid, I apologise. I want to get straight back to you. What were you trying to say at the very end of our programme?
I mean, what I was, I mean, the broad.
A lot, sorry, I can tell that. Do you know what, Khalid?
Well, you were talking about the checks and balances.
This is the really important issue, is that the middle ground. I was talking about the silence that exists on Egypt's streets.
Right.
There is a clear discomfort with the current status quo amongst the Egyptian people. Now, I believe that people went out onto the streets on the 30th of June for very valid reasons. I believe they went out onto the streets because they were deeply, deeply worried about the future of the country and the undemocratic, what I would call deeply undemocratic and dictatorial fascist tendencies of Morsi in power. And they wanted him removed.
I have to disagree with you, Khalid. I actually have to disagree with you.
In doing so,
I'm really sorry, I have to disagree.
Mona, your disagreement is noted. Let Khalid finish and we'll come back to you.
Did they mean in doing so that they wanted the military as a result to go and kill over 1,000 people? Is that what they meant? I don't think so.
Okay.
And the real problem that we have right now in people's hearts is this issue between how to define themselves between taking a pragmatic approach for the future of the country and taking a humanitarian approach to how to achieve that.
So everybody,
and the truth of the matter is we're stuck in between those two.
So Khalid, everybody on this program is speaking for the...
How would you build a democracy? By killing an existing democracy. You've killed a democracy in Egypt, a democracy that we've all been dreaming of.
Mona, I don't think you can really classify what we were doing as a democracy. The problem is that...
I have my own political agenda.
Okay, everybody on our show is talking. Everybody on our show,
someone may have a political agenda and someone may have to impose it. However, how
Mona,
do you enforce your own
in
political
London,
agenda?
please hold for a moment. Okay, I am going to call your name. You're going to make a very brief point, and then we're going to move on because we're running out of time. Community, you take precedence. Malika.
Well, we asked our community, what does it feel like to be an Egyptian in Egypt right now? Because for a lot of us who are looking at this from an outsider's perspective, we wanted to hear from Egyptians on the ground. We got several responses. This one is from Minna, who says, it feels confusing because you don't know who's right, who's not, and you just want things to be normal again, of course, begging the question, what is normal? And another one from Iskandarana, who says, it's heartbreaking most of the time. Tariq, what does it feel like to be an Egyptian outside of Egypt and seeing the events in Egypt?
Well, I think the heartbreaking part of it is a lot more wrenching, because all you see is this yelling and this bickering, and what you yearn for is that euphoria, that hope, that optimism, that potential for change that we saw coming out of January 25th.
Let me just cut through the chatter because I know you're all going to want to jump in on the same questions. I'm going to call you by name so that we can hear you beautifully clearly. Miral, where you're sitting right now, what is it like to be an Egyptian right now in Egypt from your perspective?
Well, I think first, I believe it feels proud. A lot of other people might not agree with me at the moment, but I think that the idea that this country is truly up against terrorism and that is uniting everybody. And I also wanted to tell Ms. Mona, and this is honestly out of good faith, I mean, if her people wanted to come back to Egyptian society and if the Muslim Brotherhood want to go back and be included in the political process, if the Muslim Brotherhood decide for the violence to be stopped, it will stop right away.
Okay.
And this is a very important point. And if they decide to renounce violence and, come up with a very, with a compromise definition and come to dialogue with every other group in the Egyptian society now and come up with a definition in the relationship of the state and religion, I think this would be the way out of this. Because at the end of the day, there's not one side that's going to rule Egypt forever. And this is, for me, the ball is in their court. Whenever they decide that they want to be included, they will be, and nobody will reject.
All right, Mona, is that even a realistic suggestion for the Muslim Brotherhood?
If I just may state some facts, because my opponent seems to have forgot most of them. There's a criminal regime now in power. I should be clearer. It's actually a mafia that has disregarded the sanctity of human lives. They have killed thousands in cold blood. Yes, the day before yesterday, 52 prisoners were killed extrajudicially, without extrajudicially. They've killed even people who are detained without any charge, without any reason. So innocent people.
Miral, I would ask you to just hold tight for a second. Miral, please, one moment.
So as an Egyptian, please, as an Egyptian, I have lost 5 of my very dear friends. One of them was a woman who was taking refuge in a tent, and this oppressive regime came in and burned the tent where women actually were taking refuge. I'm talking about almost every family I know has lost a loved one. Please allow me to continue. The only way out is through a democratic process. I think what's being missed here is that the democratic process was in place. We were heading towards it. It wasn't complete yet. We needed proper opposition doing its job through a parliament. We did not have this parliament. We had a complicit judiciary that dissolved an actual parliament that has actually. We had a constitutional court that should have protected the constitution.
Okay, Mona, if I may, I just wanted to ask you something about what you just brought up.
We have a very serious situation that they're taking. Please say again?
Yes, so what I wanted to ask you, you said the only way forward is by a democratic process. How do you get there from today?
First of all, those criminals who have committed those atrocious crimes should be brought to justice. Second of all, we need to reinstate the democratic process in Egypt. We need to be able to work together as Egyptians. Third of all, we need national reconciliation, and we all know that democracy actually leads. Democracy is divisive, and as Egyptians, we need to work a way without the use of weapons to be able to, without the use of weapons from those who own the weapons, from this military junta and its side. We need to be able to find a political way to argue.
What is a protester that is holding a machine gun?
For the past 40 days, we've seen
Why
some of the
aren't you
worst
answering
massacres.
Okay, so it's very obvious right now, Mona, that we don't have a political way to argue, not even on an interactive television show. That is problematic. Khaled, I'm just going to come back to you, but for something that just gives us a human perspective, from your take on what is it like to be an Egyptian in Egypt today? From the outside, it looks chaotic and bloody and violent. From the inside, what's it like?
I mean, these are very, very dark days in Egypt. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Everyone walks around with a heaviness in their hearts and a kind of confusion. There are many of the arguments like have happened on the show today happening within people's families. People taking, because the polarization forces people into very, very difficult positions sometimes, which can be very hard to justify. On the other hand, I believe within that, on a much broader scale, there remains room for optimism. There remains room for optimism because what has happened over the last 2.5 years shows very clearly that this country is not willing to accept any vision of the future from either side.
Right.
That includes any form of authoritarian fascism. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen by the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm afraid to say that's what we're seeing right now by the military that's in power.
All right, so Khaled,
what we need to do as a country is we need to have faith in the fact that we've got this far and we can continue to move out of it. And I believe this country is strong enough to do so.
Okay, so Tarek, you've been listening to our 3 guests, so 3 other guests who are very invested. If you're watching this as a stream viewer, how would you make sense of the last 35 minutes? What were they hearing happening?
Good Lord, I don't think you could make sense of it, really. I mean, I think what you see are 3 very real sides of Egypt. Those who, all of them believing so deeply in their point of view. And as a stream viewer, you have to wonder what it is that brought the country to this point.
Right.
And everyone wants to hope for Egypt. There's a lot of yearning here. We saw the Egyptians go out to the streets after the Tunisians went out to the streets. We saw the Libyans try and recreate their country as well. And everyone hopes that we can get back on that path. And I do think that there is a chance, however slim.
Did you hear that today?
Hear what exactly?
Getting back on the path?
Getting back on the path to democracy?
Yeah.
I hear a hope for it coming from everyone, perhaps except Meral. Sorry, Meral. I think you think that we're on it, but I don't.
I find that greatly offensive, by the way. This is no.
I didn't hear that you think that we're on a democratic path. I'm sorry, but we're not.
I think that political
so
Islam has long been an obstacle to democracy in the Middle East. And I think that only now it's not enough for political Islam to only renounce violence, but also it's important for them to
So Meral,
really
I'm just going to tell you
definition.
what happened to Khalid. We're right at the end of the program. So thank you for the analysis. What happened in 45 minutes? I'm going to watch the tape. The last word goes to the community. Malika.
Thank you for it. So we asked our community, how would you explain what's going on in Egypt in 140 characters, a tweet.
Right.
Jason Stern writes in, we don't need 140 characters, just one word, tragedy. But because I hate to leave the show on a sad note, I want to echo what Khalid said and echo what Tariq said with a little bit of hope. Samir Khan tweets in, please invite the same guests 1 year later and ask them about Egypt. There will be answers to many of their differences.
Wow, I'm going to have white hair if we do that show again. It was wonderful having all of your expertise, your takes on Egypt. It gives you an idea of what the conversation is, even if it's complicated and there is no consensus whatsoever. Now, what we'll be doing on Tuesday. Do you believe in UFOs? I did say UFOs, or maybe you think that 9/11 was an inside job. Conspiracy theories are all over the internet. And tomorrow we'll examine the culture that is driving them. Until then, you know where we will be, always online at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching. Take care.